All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll give people maybe 1 or 2 more minutes just to join in, and then we'll get started. Okay, why don't we get started? Thank you so much, everyone, for joining our latest installment of Solutions for Success. This month's topic is building modern applications with Microsoft Azure, React, NextJS, Angular, amongst other components and bits and pieces in Azure. Really, the theme of the session, and I will be joined by 2 of my colleagues, who I will introduce momentarily, is really just things to think about and components in Microsoft Azure when you are modernizing your applications or building new applications, and just how you do that as opposed to the traditional, perhaps .NET and SQL approach that you might be more accustomed with on-premise. So, the agenda for today's session. Again, we'll give you just the 30-second update on who Point Alliance is. I will introduce my colleagues Eleanor and Chintan to you. We will get into what a high-level solution architecture would look like using these tools. We will give you a little information again on front-end, back-end integration, a look at the Azure portal, and then get into one example to make sure that we tie it all together at the end. And if you've got questions, please post those in the chat or save them to the end. So very quickly, we are Point Alliance. We are a Microsoft solution partner in Toronto. My name is Jonathan Hamilton. I am the president. There is my contact information. I am joined today by 2 of my colleagues, Eleanor, who's one of our web solution architects. And again, you can see her, she's got more badges than I do, more technically certified. And Chintan will also be doing the demo for us and talking a little bit about the back-end technologies. Again, more badges than I have. So without further ado, Point Alliance, we, as I mentioned, are a Microsoft Solutions partner based in Toronto, Ontario, with competencies in modern work, security, digital and app innovation in Azure, which is going to be our focus today, and data and AI Azure. Our team is 100% Microsoft certified. We're very proud of that. And you can find us at pointalliance.com/company profile for more information. So this is where I will turn things over to Eleanor, who's going to walk us through, again, just some of the high-level components, things to think about, benefits of modern apps in Microsoft Azure. So Eleanor, over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. So this webinar is about building modern apps with Azure. We're gonna focusing on how front end layer, integration layer, and back end layer, and how these Azure services and resources and how we use them, and then how it's all related together, right? And how it's interconnected. So why use Azure services? there are benefits to it. So it allows business to deploy their application to uh, like deploy their application close to their employees, customer. It has global data centers network which delivers your content quickly, reliable with low latency and costs. It is cost effective, which allows your business to adjust their cloud services based on the demand, the runtime, background tasks, and schedule, that type of things. Also scalability, where Azure resources can be adjusted based again on demand, scaling resources, right? Depending on the spike of your customer demands or employee demands, depending on season and all that stuff. Um, there's also like reliability, as I said earlier, for storage option. You could have Azure backup for VMs. This has Azure recovered services that you can have a default backup 14, 30 days, depending on the settings. Azure storage option like Azure Blob, where you can create version and restore like a point on any point, depending on the settings again. Um, there's a lot of wide range of services, like, used for infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, which we're going to demo later, like with different resource, software as a service. Now it's artificial as a service for Copilot, and model as a service. Like, for example, you have robotics and automation, right? So in this webinar, we will focus on Azure service built on an application um, or platform as a service. So resources, as we're building an application, this is a simple architecture that we have that we're going to show you. This sample diagram, how we leverage cloud services built from the front end layer, where we use static web app with NextJS, Angular as a front end layer. And then we also use the integration layer with logic apps, which is we have that in the middle integration layer, and backend layer, which has all your data and content stored. And keep in mind, all these are residing on your Microsoft tenant. So Microsoft Entra ID is being used as a core identity and access management for all these other services. So your Azure administrator, they would need to create subscriptions. These subscriptions are all the collection or container of your resources where your all cloud services are like grouped together. Okay, so Azure Portal. Azure Portal is where you install those cloud services. You need to have access to this. Your administrator need to give you a certain role for you to use this subscription and resources. So just to give you a high level, Azure subscription, right, created by Azure administrator, where all resources, groups, and services has to be created. A person needs to have an owner or full access to all these resources so that you can deploy your the cloud service within that resource and subscription. Either owner or contributor role can create and manage these resources within the subscription. We need to create a resource group to include those cloud services, the one that we mentioned on front end integration and back end layer, so that we can build our application. So let's focus on front end layer, solution layer. So the front end these are static web app, or it can be an app web service depending on the complexity of your app. So on this one, we have a static web app, which we use Next.js or React or Angular as a presentation layer, right? For complex application, we could put in an app web service as a resource on the top, where, for example, you have a .NET Core or Node.js using it. So again, this is we're focusing in here. From the front end layer, we have example, these are forms, views, pages, search bars, and buttons. So when a user click a button, you call something from the back end, or that's where the integration layer happens. So the front end layer, the structure are like HTML, JavaScript, Next.js, React, and Angular. And then you use an Azure service for more complex one. Again, I didn't put it in the app web service, right? So to define a static web app, right, I'll show you the sample. So you go to Portal, Azure, click on the static web app, and then within that, there will give you basic deployment configuration, advanced tag, review, and create. And then if you click here, this will tell you, as I was mentioning earlier, you need to have a subscription. You need to have access to this subscription and resource group for you to be able to deploy a static web app. And then notice on the region, it's global. Normally static web app are global, right? And then the other details, the name of the app and all those things. So this is the definition after you create it. So you would have a URL. Like URLs normally, like this is a default that Microsoft give you, like your nice tone and all that stuff. You can change that with a new DNS setting. You can do that, but for development purpose, you can always just use that for the time being. Or again, talk to your IT administrator. You can change it to a more like user-friendly URL. On the left side here, you'll notice there are some settings and monitoring metrics, right? Activity log for your static web app. Later on, Chintan will be able to show you some of the components here and explain detail, like what this does, like activity log and all those things there later. So now, after describing the front end layer, we have the integration layer, from front end. How do you connect to your back end? So we call that the integration layer. There are different cloud services, Azure cloud services that we can leverage, right? So we had identified it on this middle part: Logic App, Azure Function, Web App, API Service Management. So in the backend layer, as we were saying, Azure Functions, we would use Azure Function for running business logic when it's triggered from your front end. There are code snippets running on triggered by events or a click or user interaction. So an example is like, if you try to upload a file from a form, you can call Azure Function, and then that Azure Function can also call the Logic app to push that file to your SharePoint or Azure blog, right? A Logic app, like, is a serverless workflow that you can connect data services, which means, like, as I mentioned, you can have your Azure function calling a Logic app. The Logic app can also like push that data, like a massive amount of data, like files, images, videos, and all that to your storage, right? You can have this async calls, and then you can also use Logic app for sending notifications, right? Or batch uploads of files. So APIM, these are API management services you can use for securely publishing and managing and monitoring some of your API calls from front end to the back end layer. And then I also put in Azure Web Apps here because you can put a complex application that also does from your front end. You can create like a CRUD operations. Oops, sorry. CRUD operations, sorry, I just that to do your get, post, pull, delete API requests to your backend. Right? And you can also use your web app services to do some of your application authorization, because you don't normally just do that from your enterprise app role or from tenant or within your application services security or enterprise application. You can define that authorization. If you have a custom user management, you can use the your app to do application authorization through using your web app services. All right, so from front end integration, now how do you connect? How do you get to your backend, right? So your integration is what you use for the backend. So there are different backend types, right? You can have a structured and unstructured, where all your file storage are. We didn't put SharePoint here, but you can also use SharePoint as your file storage, especially there are apps that use like model-driven apps that you use to put your files in SharePoint. But for the time being, what we have here for simplicity, we use file storage, Azure Blob Storage to store like videos, files, that type of things, right? So backend layer, so we would have structured data. We would use Azure SQL or PostgreSQL or Cosmos DB. There are difference between the three. Azure SQL and PostgreSQL, the PostgreSQL, there's open source, and both can use complex queries for database management system. Cosmos DB is multi-model, NoSQL. It has flexible schema. Both of them, they're all platform used as a service. And then Cosmos DB offers low latency, right? Blob storage, of course, like, we can't use the structured data if we want to store files, videos, images. We would use Azure Blob Storage. The good thing about Azure Blob Storage supports versioning. It has cost optimization. You can have um, if you have consistent access to the storage, you can use different tier, hot, cool, archive, and then again, for cost-effective measures, if, for example, you have a data that you don't use and you wanted to retrieve it right away, you can use the cool tier. If you're not using your data, you can move that data in the archive tier where you don't care how long it takes for you to fetch that data or files or whatsoever. Hot tier is when you use it if you consistently have to read, write, and get data from it, right? And then you can create private endpoint and immutable storage. Again, for security, you can use a SaaS, shared access signature, allowing people with time-sensitive information. You can send that URL to a person, and then you can have that expiry. So again, there is structured data and unstructured data. So that's front end integration layer and back end layer. So I will hand it over to Chintan on the monitoring side.
Thank you, Eleanor. It was great. On the monitoring side, once we start creating resources on the Azure, we need some sort of monitoring services that we can leverage to see what our resources are doing and are we using them effectively with the cost or not. So there are several monitoring solutions that Azure provides, and you can see here there is a one called Azure Front Door. Front Door is basically a cloud-based service that acts as a global load balancer but an application accelerator. It also uses the Microsoft Edge network to route the traffic internally and improve the performance. It also has inbuilt DDoS protection. Other two are Log Analytics Workspace and Application Insights. Log Analytics Workspace are uh, I used to store various amount of logs and traces related to any service that that can leverage the Azure. And application insights are more focused on performance related metrics. It can use to generate dynamic application maps and track user activities on how users are interacting with the websites. So now I will show you a small demo of the Azure environment and how these pieces fall together in the place. So let me share my screen. Yeah, so this is a sample resource group where we have created some resources based on the architecture that we just seen. This is the resource called activity report, and this is Azure functions, and all the details are given in in the when you click on the resource, you will see all the related informations. So this is the URL that we just saw. It comes out of the box, and these are the various features that you can leverage to configure this particular resource. So when you click on this URL, you will be navigated to this portfolio demo website. This is a sample web application hosted in the Azure, and you can see it is very fast because it uses mainly HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it leverages the CDN network of Azure as well. You can modify a couple of things, and in order to view other resources, this is Azure Functions. Azure Functions are quick integration workflow. For an example, if you want to perform any task which are like repetitive basis and in each interval, then you can create a Azure function based on a timer trigger. So each when the timer runs, each timer it will invoke that Azure function and it will process your task. This is the logs that you can see. It is connected to application insights. So you can see the logs from the application insights also. And in the monitoring section and investigate, you will have various features available to you. You can connect this application insight in your existing application also with this instrument connection string. In terms of Azure functions, there are some sort of pricing and an app service plan is involved. App service plan is consist of compute resource, so that allows you to access to compute service that are available in the Azure. And for a glance, let me open up the pricing plan here. Hmm. Yeah. Basically, this is a compute pricing plan for web app. You can have a basic tiers. There are some production workloads. These are all computation based on consumption. So you can have a cost per hour also and cost per month. When you move to the premium plans, you get various features such as more CPU and more storage. This is very helpful when you have a large amount of requests coming in into the application. Other things are such as uh, the storage accounts. Storage accounts also involve some sort of pricing. Storage account is basically a cloud-based storage that you can leverage. There are several types of storage accounts. Uh, you can use containers, file shares. File shares are basically a network drive that can leverage into any PC. So you will have similar to network interface and everything is stored in Azure. So it also uses the encryption. All the data is encrypted at rest. Others are queues and the tables. These are the normal storage. The most efficient ones are the containers. Containers, you can define unstructured data such as binary files, binary images, PDFs, and this can be accessed using a URL. And you can have your front-end layer interacting with the storage account to access the data. And all this is monitored in the application inside, so you can know how many requests are coming in a day, how many requests are going, what are the failures in the request. So this is the sample demo of the resource group. That will be all.
Thank you, Chintan. So, yeah, so that's the overview on how we use all these resources, Azure Cloud resources, from front-end layer to integration layer and back-end layer. And then we briefly define or briefly showed you how each of these resources can be scalable, right? You know, like this Azure storage, all this cloud services. So that's about it for our demo. So upcoming events, we do like webinars, upcoming events every third Tuesday of each month, right? Go to pointlions/events. let us know, leave us a review. And this is the end of our presentation and webinar. Thank you.